Have you ever noticed how people's behavior changes the moment you stop being easy to control? At first, they may smile, encourage you, or even appear supportive. But the instant you set firm boundaries, live by your own values, and refuse to bend, something shifts. Instead of respecting your independence, they feel threatened by it.
Why?
Because your freedom reminds them of their own lack of it. When people realize they can't control you, they don't just walk away quietly. They adapt. They switch tactics. Some will try to manipulate you with guilt, others will spread lies, some will play the victim, and others will patiently wait for you to fail. These are not random acts. They are predictable patterns of behavior that reveal the true nature of control. This video will take you through 8 powerful lessons on how people react when they lose control over you, and how Stoic philosophy can help you remain calm, strong, and unshaken. By the end, you will not only see these tactics clearly, but you'll also learn how to break free from them once and for all. One of the most common strategies people use when they can't control you is to plant seeds of doubt. Instead of confronting you directly, they quietly spread subtle, lingering questions that creep into your mind like smoke. Doubt, once it enters, works like a silent poison. It doesn't destroy you immediately, but it slowly drains your energy, makes you second-guess your own strength, and eventually wears down your resolve. Imagine this. You are starting a new project. You are filled with excitement, energy, and vision. Suddenly, someone nearby says, "Are you sure this is a good idea? What if it fails?" Maybe you're overestimating yourself. On the surface, these sound like concerns, but hidden inside them is the intention to make you pause, to shake your inner confidence. Why do people do this? Because when they cannot control your actions directly, they try to control your emotions. Doubt is a subtle weapon, softer than a knife, but just as sharp. It doesn't need to confront you openly, it only needs to whisper. And often, that whisper is enough to cause you to stumble. Stoicism teaches us that external opinions are beyond our control. Epictetus once said, "When someone criticizes you, remember, they are only speaking from their perception, not from truth." The same applies here. When people sow doubt, it does not reflect your true abilities, only their inability to accept your freedom. The wisest response is not to argue or prove them wrong, but to calmly observe and move forward. Just as a sailor cannot stop the waves from rising, but can still steer the boat, you too cannot prevent others from doubting, but you can decide how to react. A personal story. A young man once told me he wanted to open his own cafe. As soon as he shared his plan, countless voices of doubt arose. "That market is saturated, you're too young, you'll waste your money." At first, he was shaken. But when he remembered the Stoic teaching, that the only thing under his control is his own decision, he chose to continue. The cafe opened, and over time, it became successful. Later, he looked back and realized, the doubts were never about his business, but about the fears of those around him. So how should you face doubt when it's directed at you? Recognize the source. People often spread doubt not because you are incapable, but because your courage exposes their fear. Return to your values. Ask yourself, does this path align with who I want to become? If yes, then others' doubts no longer matter. Practice inner clarity. Each morning, remind yourself, what is within my control? My choices. What is beyond my control? Others' opinions. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." This principle applies inward as well. If the doubts you hear are not true, then do not let them enter your heart. In the end, people may try to plant doubts, but the decision is yours. Like seeds falling on stone, if your spirit is firm, those doubts cannot take root. And when you continue forward with steady steps, the very people who once doubted you will realize, they never truly controlled you. When some people realize they cannot shake your determination with doubt, they move to a harsher weapon. They attack your character. This tactic is dangerous because it strikes not at your actions, but at your identity. Instead of saying, "Your plan won't work," They say, "You're arrogant, selfish, untrustworthy." Notice the difference. Doubt questions the path, but character attacks question the traveler. If you are not careful, these words can cut deeply because they target your sense of self, the very foundation on which you stand. Why do people do this? Because if they can make you feel ashamed of who you are, they don't need to stop your actions. You will stop yourself. It is a form of psychological warfare. The battlefield is no longer outside, but within your heart. Think of a soldier. If his enemy destroys the bridge, he can rebuild it. But if his enemy convinces him he is a coward, then he has already lost the battle before it begins. That is the essence of character attacks. Stoicism teaches us that reputation, like wealth or power, lies outside our full control. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, "People will say or think what they will. It is not my business to be loved or admired, only to act with justice and virtue." When someone attacks your character, the only way to resist is to stand firm in your values. Their words may shake the air, but they cannot shake the truth of who you are, unless you let them. I recall a woman who rose to become a leader in her company. Her colleagues respected her competence, but a few rivals, unable to compete, began to spread rumors. "She's manipulative, she uses people." At first, she was devastated. But instead of fighting the gossip, she focused on her work, treating everyone fairly and consistently. Over time, the truth revealed itself. The very rumors intended to destroy her character ended up highlighting her integrity, because she did not collapse under their weight. So, how should you deal with character attacks? Do not rush to defend. The more you try to explain, the more power you give the attacker. Let your actions be your answer. Anchor in your values. If you live with honesty and fairness, no slander can ultimately erase that truth. Practice indifference to noise. As Epictetus taught, if someone speaks ill of you, remember, they are speaking from their perspective. If it is true, correct yourself. If it is false, ignore it. The danger of character attacks lies not in the words themselves, but in the possibility that you begin to believe them. That is why your greatest defense is inner clarity, the unshakable knowledge of who you are. In the end, when others cannot control you, they may try to paint you with dark colors. But remember, paint only sticks on surfaces, not on the essence of stone. If you remain steadfast, time will wash away the lies, and the truth of your character will shine brighter than before. When people realize they cannot influence your decisions with doubt or by attacking your character, they may switch to another tactic: withdrawal of support. This form of silent resistance is subtle but heavy. They stop helping, stop encouraging, sometimes even stop acknowledging your existence. It is as if they want to say, "If you will not do as I wish, then you will walk alone." This strategy plays on a deep human fear, the fear of isolation. We are social beings, and being excluded can feel like a punishment. Those who withdraw their support know this. They hope that by making you feel abandoned, you will step back into line, return to dependence, and once again seek their approval. But here lies the truth. Real strength is revealed when you can stand without applause, when you can move forward without being carried. Stoicism teaches us that virtue is self-sufficient. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Be like the rock against which the waves crash. It stands firm, and the raging sea falls still around it." Support from others may be helpful, but it is not essential. What is essential is the integrity of your own path. Consider the story of a young woman who chose to leave her family's traditional career to pursue art. At first, her relatives discouraged her. When she persisted, they withdrew their support, even ignoring her achievements. She felt abandoned. But instead of giving in, she turned to her inner strength. She painted, exhibited, and eventually, her work received recognition. Years later, those who had withdrawn now praised her success. She learned that their withdrawal was not her weakness, it was their inability to accept her freedom. So, how can you face this silent form of control? Acknowledge the loneliness. Do not deny it. Walking alone is difficult. But remember, solitude is not emptiness. It can be the space where you find your truest self. Seek strength within. As Epictetus taught, if you want freedom, learn to be indifferent to what is not yours to control. Others' support is never fully yours to control. Build resilience. Each step you take without external approval strengthens your independence. The truth is, those who withdraw their support believe they are punishing you. But in reality, they are giving you a gift, the chance to discover that your path does not depend on their permission. And when you continue forward without bending, you send a message stronger than words. I walk this road not because it is easy, not because you approve, but because it is mine. In the end, losing the support of those who try to control you may feel painful, but it is also liberating. For only when you no longer depend on their approval do you discover the highest form of freedom, the freedom to live according to your own values. When doubt, character attacks, and withdrawal of support all fail, many people reach for a more insidious weapon, guilt. Unlike anger or criticism, guilt does not confront you head-on. It creeps quietly into your conscience, making you question not your abilities, but your goodness. They might say, after everything I've done for you, this is how you treat me. Or, if you really cared, you wouldn't act this way. These words are not about your decisions, but about your heart. They aim to tie your freedom to an invisible chain, the fear of being seen as ungrateful or unloving. Why do they use guilt? Because it attacks the most sensitive part of the human soul, our need for connection and our fear of hurting others. If they can convince you that choosing your path makes you selfish, then they don't need to block your road, you will stop yourself out of shame. But Stoicism reminds us, emotions like guilt are not inherently destructive, it depends on how we interpret them. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is right, do not be troubled." True guilt should only come when we betray our own values, not when we refuse to live accor. Consider the story of a man who wanted to change careers to follow his passion. His family reacted by saying, "So everything we sacrificed for you he fell. So how can you face the weapon of guilt?" Differentiate true guilt from false true. Reaffirm your values. If your decision is rooted in honesty, courage, and integrity, then you have nothing to regret. Respond with calm, not anger. As Epictetus taught, no one can harm you without your consent. You are harmed only if you believe you are. The greatest danger of guilt is not the words of others, but the way you internalize them. If you allow yourself to be defined by their accusations, you will be trapped. But if you hold fast to your own sense of justice, guilt loses its power. In the end, those who try to bind you with guilt may succeed for a moment. But once you realize that gratitude and obedience are not the same, you break the chain. And when you continue your path without bitterness, only clarity, you prove a deeper truth. Love and freedom can coexist, and choosing your own way is not betrayal, but the highest form of honesty. When guilt fails, some people resort to a quieter but equally dangerous tactic, shaking your confidence. They don't openly oppose you. Instead, they ask questions that plant seeds of doubt. Are you sure that's the right decision? Do you really think you can handle that? It sounds risky, Ma. At first, these comments may sound like concern or advice. But over time, they accumulate like drops of water on stone, eroding your self-belief. Their goal is not to guide you, but to make you hesitate, because a person who doubts themselves is easier to influence than one who is decisive. Stoic philosophy warns us of this trap. Epictetus wrote, "No man is free who is not master of himself." If your decisions constantly bend to others' doubts, you are not mastering yourself, you are surrendering your freedom. Imagine walking across a bridge. It is strong and steady, but someone beside you whispers, "What if it collapses?" At first you were confident, but after hearing the question again and again, you begin to doubt, even though nothing about the bridge has changed. That is exactly how manipulators attack your confidence. not by facts, but by suggestion. I once knew a young woman who wanted to start her own business. Every time she shared her ideas, her friends would say, "That's ambitious, maybe too ambitious." Over time, she started to believe them, until one day she realized the doubts were not hers, they belonged to those too afraid to take risks themselves. She chose to move forward, and her success proved that her confidence had been right all along. So how do you protect yourself from this subtle sabotage? Trust your reasoning. If your decision is based on thought and integrity, stand by it. Doubt from others does not equal truth. Stop over-explaining. The more you justify yourself, the more room you give them to attack. Confidence speaks through quiet certainty, not endless debate. Remember where doubt comes from. Often, it reflects their fears, not your reality. What they cannot do, they try to project onto you. Seneca once said, "A man who suffers before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary." The doubts they plant are exactly this, unnecessary suffering, born not of reality but of fear. At the end of the day, your confidence is your foundation. If you let others chip away at it, you will always remain dependent on their approval. But if you root yourself in self-trust, their doubts become noise, unable to shake your core. Confidence is not arrogance, it is the quiet strength of knowing your own path. And when others try to weaken it, the strongest response is not anger, not defense, but simply walking forward with calm certainty. When direct control, guilt, or subtle doubt no longer work, some people resort to a primal tactic, emotional provocation. They poke at your pride, insult your intelligence, or twist your words, not because they seek truth, but because they want to see you lose control.
Why?
Because once you explode in anger, they gain the moral high ground. They can point to your reaction and say, "See? I told you they're unreasonable." Suddenly, you are the aggressor, and they get to play the calm, rational victim. This is not about discussion, it is about bait. Every insult, every sarcastic remark, every unfair accusation is a hook, waiting for you to bite. Stoicism teaches us the most powerful response, not to react. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." When someone tries to light a fire inside you, the greatest strength is to remain unmoved. Think of your emotions as a flame and their words as the wind. If you react, the fire grows wild and uncontrollable. But if you remain calm, the fire fades, leaving them powerless. I once witnessed a man at work constantly baited by a colleague. Every meeting, the colleague would mock his ideas, twist his words, and try to push him into defending himself. For a long time, he took the bait and got angry, which only made him look unprofessional. But one day, he simply smiled and said, "That's an interesting perspective." No argument, no defense. The room went silent. The provocateur had nothing left to use. From that moment on, the attacks lost their edge. So how can you disarm this tactic? Recognize the game. Ask yourself, are they really seeking understanding, or just trying to provoke me? Pause before responding. A deep breath can break the chain of impulse. Walk away when needed. Not every battle deserves your energy. Sometimes silence is the sharpest weapon. Epictetus reminded us, "It is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Those who provoke you rely on your reaction. Remove that, and they lose everything. In the end, strength is not measured by how loudly you shout, but by how calmly you stand. When you refuse to be dragged into their chaos, you protect both your dignity and your peace. The greatest victory over provocation is not to fight, but to show that you cannot be moved. When manipulation, guilt, and provocation fail, some people adopt another strange strategy. They imitate you. At first, it seems harmless, maybe even flattering. You make a bold decision, they make a similar one. You share an idea, and suddenly they repeat it as if it were theirs. But soon, you realize this is not coincidence, it's a pattern. Why do they copy? Because if they can't defeat you, they try to become you. Instead of building their own path, they mimic yours, hoping to borrow your strength and claim your achievements. But imitation is always one step behind. Think of it like a shadow and the sun. The shadow may look similar in outline, but it has no substance of its own. It moves only when the light moves, never leading, never creating. That is the nature of imitation: hollow, dependent, and temporary. Stoicism offers clarity here. Seneca wrote, "Character, not imitation, defines a man." A person may steal your words, your style, even your strategies, but they cannot steal your essence, your experience, your mind, your authenticity. I once knew someone who copied nearly everything a colleague did. When the colleague took on a new project, they suddenly showed interest in the same field. When the colleague changed approach, they mirrored it step by step. At first, it was frustrating, as though originality was being stolen. But over time, it became clear. The more they copied, the more obvious their emptiness became. And when the colleague shifted direction unexpectedly, the imitator was lost, with nothing of their own to fall back on. So how do you deal with imitators? Stop focusing on them. The fact that they copy you already means they are behind. Keep evolving. The faster you grow, the harder it becomes for them to keep up. Remember the truth: imitation is not flattery, it is insecurity. They copy because they lack the courage to be themselves. In the end, copies fade. What remains is authenticity. Your unique path cannot be stolen, because no one else has lived your struggles, learned your lessons, or carried your exact perspective. Let them copy. While they are busy chasing shadows, you are busy creating light. Sometimes, when people realize they cannot manipulate, guilt, or imitate you, they choose a quieter strategy. They wait. They stand on the sidelines, pretending to support you, but in truth, they are hoping for your downfall. They may smile at your ambitions and say, "I hope it works out for you," but deep down, their unspoken thought is, "Let's see how long before it collapses." They are not cheering for your success. They are keeping score, ready to whisper, "I knew it," at the first sign of struggle.
Why?
Because your success threatens them. It reminds them of the risks they never took, the dreams they abandoned, the courage they lacked. And so, if they cannot rise to your level, they wait for you to fall to theirs. But Stoicism reminds us, their hope for your failure does not define your path. Epictetus said, "Do not waste energy on those who hope for your downfall." Your focus should be on growth, not on proving them wrong. Think of it like a storm and a tree. A weak tree bends and breaks when the wind howls. But a tree with deep roots remains firm, no matter how violently the storm rages. Those who wait for your failure are like the wind, noisy, relentless, but powerless to uproot you unless you let them. I once knew someone whose friend seemed supportive, always asking questions like, "Are you sure this is going to work?" Or, "It sounds risky, but good luck." At first, it seemed harmless, even caring. But when setbacks came, that friend was the first to remind him, "See, I told you it wouldn't be easy." It was then he realized they had never believed in him. They weren't hoping for his success, they were waiting for his failure. So how do you deal with such people? Recognize the signs. If someone is quick to notice your failures but silent about your victories, take note. Stop seeking their validation. Your journey is for you, not to prove anything to them. Let success be your answer. Continue moving forward, not to spite them, but to honor your own growth. In the end, some people treat your life like entertainment, watching and waiting for the moment you stumble. Don't give them the satisfaction. Continue, persist, succeed, not for their eyes, but for your own fulfillment. Because nothing silences those waiting for your fall more powerfully than rising higher than they ever imagined possible. Now that you've seen the 8 tactics people use when they can't control you, one truth becomes clear. The real battle is not with them, it's within yourself. People will try to guilt you, provoke you, copy you, or wait for your failure, but none of these strategies work unless you react. Their power ends where your self-mastery begins. Stoicism reminds us that true strength is not in controlling others, but in refusing to be controlled. When you stop explaining yourself, stop seeking approval, and stop letting guilt dictate your choices, something remarkable happens. The manipulators fade away, the weak-minded drift off, and the people who truly respect you remain. Freedom is not about cutting ties with everyone, but about building unshakable roots within yourself. The moment you realize that your emotions, your choices, and your path belong to you alone, you step into a life where control loses its grip. So ask yourself, will you let others dictate who you are, or will you rise above their games and live as the Stoics taught, calm, free, and unshaken? The choice is yours.